Hello and welcome to Roll Call Part 7, The Specialists. My name's Fen, and in this series we look at various different types of survivor builds and classes and archetypes, discuss how to get them, the philosophies of them, and provide a few build ideas where appropriate. In this video we're looking at the unique and special kind of survivors that they do something that is more than just requires a gear grid. They have something innate to them that is unique and unusual. So that includes, and we'll be talking about in this video, Crystal Skin, Leyline Walkers, Ageless Apprentices, Acanthus Doctors, Gloom men and ladies, Necromancers, and Silk Surgeons. So we'll start with, over here on the rulebook, with Crystal Skin. So Crystal Skin is an ability that is gained during the mineral gathering event, and it's right here. You ignore Cursed, you cannot wear armor. When you depart you gain 3 armor points to all hit locations, but you suffer -2 to the results of all severe injury rolls. When you participate in Intimacy, newborns gain Crystal Skin in addition to any other roll results. So what this is doing is removing your ability to wear armor, you lose armor sets, you lose all of that, and also increasing the chances of you dying or suffering more dangerous severe injuries. But the benefits of this is you get 3 armor points to all hit locations when you depart, no matter what. Additionally, you get to ignore Cursed, and you free up 5 slots on your gear grid to put a whole load of other things in. So you get a little bit of durability, you become more fragile, but ultimately you gain a lot more slot freedom, and that's something that makes these very desirable and useful survivors. Additionally, the fact that once we have one Crystal Skin survivor, we can pass it on to newborns, as it's a dominant trait, so it's always passed on to the newborns if a Crystal Skin survivor is one of the 2 parents. We just need to get this once, and then we can propagate it to anyone we want in our settlement, or well, any new survivor we want in our settlement. So let's start with how you get this, and then we'll discuss a little bit of what kind of survivors you want to put it on, and a few ideas of gear cards and everything, because this is one where I'm not really going to go into gear in a massive amount of detail, simply because, well, you've got so much freedom to put any items, weapons on your grid that you want, so I'll just give general philosophies. Well, let's start with how you unlock it. The very first thing is you're going to need a pickaxe. You cannot get mineral gathering without a pickaxe. The second thing is this 8+ result. We want to get past this and into the worm tunnels and then into the crystal lake. So we need to be going after overwhelming darkness, which means only certain monsters are going to cover that. And if we look here, the Screaming Antelope is probably the earliest one. This is the level 2 Screaming Antelope, and it sits here, leaving this space for mineral gathering. And this is what you're looking for. The White Lion, unfortunately, sits on the space where mineral gathering is, which denies access. So this kind of spot, this is the best we want. The Screaming Antelope's also, it's a reasonable target. It's probably a little bit softer than the level 2 White Lion. Debatable. But either way, this is the kind of thing you're looking for to get going on this. Now, the other thing we want is, if we look at the worm tunnel results, we add 2 to the result if we have a sickle. And what we care about to get Crystal Skin is the 8+ result. So we want our survivor who is looking to get Crystal Skin to be packing a bone sickle, giving them the +2. We absolutely do not want them to have a whip, because a whip keeps you away from the Crystal Lake entirely, because your minimum roll would be a 3. So that's our goal. Our chosen survivor, bone pickaxe, bone sickle, both on the same gear grid, and thankfully these are great pieces of gear you like to have on a survivor, so there's not really much tension in unlocking this. The real difficulty is it'll take a bit of time. It is random, you need to roll the 8+, you need to then roll the 6+, and then you need to roll the 1 and the 2. And these are not the kind of things worth spending lifetime rerolls on, because it's not a life or death situation. You want to save that for something else. Also, you don't want to be like completely thoughtless with who you're picking to carry this combo. You want it to be somebody who's going to be functional, because once they return to the settlement, the spores are going to mature and you're going to get crystal skin and never be able to wear armor again. So you do not want this on a survivor whose entire build philosophy is around armor. That is not good. So damage dealers, especially archers and supports. So archers, they've got distance to help protect them further against the monster. Quite often being far enough away from the monster just keeps you safe, because other survivors get targeted first, or if you do get targeted, quite often you can dash and run out of range of the monster, helping everyone else and preventing yourself from being harmed. Anyway, so that's great. And additionally, both archers and support survivors love to have extra slots. Archers so they can put more arrows and a quiver into their gear grid, and support survivors because they love to have as many items as possible. Another thing to note is, while you're denied armor, you're not denied shields. So you can put some shields into your gear grid and get some extra armor points. If you just consider the base campaign, a leather shield and an oxidized beacon shield, that's 2 slots, that's plus 3 armor to all hit locations. So now you've got 6 armor on hit locations. Add an oxidized beacon shield, that could be another 2 to all locations at the cost of 3 slots. So you can become more durable. But the other piece of gear I really recommend you get is a way of avoiding dying, or more specifically suffering severe injuries. So hopefully they're here, yes. So just here we've got a few things that you can consider using. Base game, dried Acanthus, extra survival, first severe injury you suffer, you'll ignore it and archive this instead. Or if we have the Gloom, we've got these 3 lovely options. Cheapest one, healing potion. It'll archive itself to remove 1 severe injury, 1 permanent severe injury at the end of the showdown. So that's okay, not amazing. Much better and harder to get is the life elixir, which each time you would die from a severe injury, well, the first time you would die from a severe injury, you ignore that injury. And remember, like, if you get hit in the head with a severe injury, 60% chance of just immediate death. So this is a nice little option. And then there's a regeneration suit, which if you get it active, and it's an accessory so you can wear it, it's not armor, it'll let you remove any permanent injuries you suffered during this showdown. So you could run a combination of life elixir or dried Acanthus and a regeneration suit, along with enough affinities like leather shield fits very nicely around leather shield, goes really nicely here, and that'll give you some extra protection. So that's all things you consider and run. Now, the next one we're going to look at has a lot of similarities. That is, though, the Leyline Walker. So that is gained from a different event. When you reach maximum understanding, you will trigger White Secret. You suffer the lunacy brain trauma, and then you remember the story. And over here, on the right hand side, for a 9 or 10, or a 7, 8, 9 or 10 in the case of barbaric settlement. Again, I'd never recommend barbaric. Romantic is just superior in about every single way, but on a 9 or 10 you'll gain the extra senses fighting art and the Leyline Walker ability, which is, while there's no armor or accessory gear in your gear grid, you gain plus 3 evasion. Now, before we get into it, I want to briefly talk about ley lines, because it's kind of a fun little thing. So the concept of ley lines is they are these straight lines you can draw across various historic or prehistoric site structures or landmarks. This is like a very old conspiracy theory without actually being a conspiracy as such. There was a English antiquarian by the name of Alfred Watkins back in the 1920s, and he was wandering around and looking at maps and things like that, and he posited that you could draw straight lines between various historic structures in the UK, and these were like trade routes of ancient British societies. This, of course, has never been accepted because Well, he's trying to draw connections between natural landmarks and historic structures, and then prehistoric sites, so things from completely different time periods, which just happen to be in straight lines. You know, you can get stuff in straight lines, especially when you consider the prehistoric sites where you don't have carts, you don't have roads. People weren't travelling in straight lines over the top of like high mountains, hills. Really, hills in the UK doesn't have many mountains, and similar. So it's kind of but also there's a separate one that was raised in Germany in the 1920s about the concept of holy lines, which it came about entirely independently. So people were looking at this sort of pattern and trying to make sense of it. It's not a thing. Archaeologists refute it. It's cute. It's kind of like fun, but it's not really. There's no evidence, and I don't think there ever will be any evidence. It's definitely bunk. However, in Kingdom Death, ley lines can be a real thing. And the concept here, there's this woman with long hair so fine it couldn't even be seen. She claimed she could feel anything her hair touched, and on her death badge she cut off all and gifted a single strand to any visitor, and they got scattered floating in the wind, and that's the whole kind of thing. And we know in the world of Kingdom Death, stories have weight, they have meaning, they have power. That's entirely what the White Secret is about, and that's what the White Speakers deal with. So it's a pretty cool thing. It has a lot of similarities to Crystal Skin, except if we look, not only are we unable to wear armour, we are not allowed to wear accessory gear, and we get in exchange +3 evasion. So we can still run shields, and we probably should, because a survivor does not have enough natural soak to withstand without having some kind of protection. And as good as evasion is, eventually a monster may roll a 10, and having just a bit more protection matters. Also, you're not forced to use this. You can get Leyline Walker and just ignore it entirely, but if you do get it, you should lean into the evasion as much as possible. Our classic options are Monster Grease, so you'll want some green affinities. You get +2 evasion, that's quite nice. Or you can go with the Shadow Saliva Shawl, but that does deny shields, so you're very much all in on evasion, and you can get +3 evasion by getting enough green affinities. You can't run both of these together, they're mutually exclusive because of the rules of the Shadow Saliva Shawl. So again, long range characters, that kind of stuff, or if you have survivors with Crystal Skin, that's great if they get that combination together. Or you can have various naked forms of survivors that occur and appear in the Gambler's Chest, which we'll talk about those when the Gambler's Chest is on the simulator. Right, so that's our 2 core game abilities. We're now going to look at some expansion stuff. First of all, I just want to make note of it. Hellfire absolutely has its own specialty build. This is People of the Sun only. I'm going to be doing a video on each of the 3 campaigns, discussing and going through all of the different elements of each one, and looking at really neat and interesting stuff like this. So it's here for the sake of completeness to say I didn't forget it, but it's something we'll deal with in the future. Instead, we're coming over here and we're going to look at Ageless Apprentice. So this is a secret fighting art from the Lion Knight, and it effectively gives you the Ageless ability without telling you you're ageless. I expect to see this get errated, so it does end up being ageless. And when you depart, you may rotate up to 3 gear cards in your gear grid. This changes a function of their affinities and arrows, but otherwise the gear functions normally. This is a completely unique ability. I can't even start to go through all of the different uses for this. It just completely revolutionizes everything. So I'm mostly going to talk about how you unlock it. And that happens through the showdowns. So the very first thing you need to do is beat the Lion Knight, and you need to, during the victory, the survivor who dealt the killing blow, quote-unquote killing blow, because it's all a play, gets given this hideous disguise rare gear. Here it is. It's a 2 armor point head slot item mask bone other. It's an accessory. It's cursed. It gives you +1 strength. And at the start of your showdown, when you're fighting the Lion Knight, you get to choose your roll card. That in itself is not good. This is not a great gear at all. +1 strength and 2 armor points to the head is not terrible rate, but the lack of affinities does make it awkward to deal with at times. But you need it, because what you have to do is the survivor with hideous disguise needs to deal the death blow to the Lion Knight. And you can do that in the second or the third fight against the Lion Knight. That's really, depends whether the circumstances line up correctly. You can manipulate this as much as possible with hit location control and everything like that. But the survivor with a hideous disguise rare gear will find themselves alone on stage, surrounded by darkness. One by one, the members of the Lion Knight's retinue, that is, I can't remember the names, it's Ash, Rand and Sam, I think. One by one, they are illuminated in front of the survivor, they hum a tone, and then the survivor hums along in eerie harmony, and they gain the Ageless Apprentice secret fighting art. And then they still have to roll on this table because the Lion Knight is a poor loser and might just butcher their own apprentice. I do think that should maybe be changed a bit, that you just get to immediately skip this. But it is what it is. You get a very, very, very good fighting art that is completely unique. You've only really got one opportunity. Well, you can only have one survivor to get this, and if that survivor dies in the second showdown, then another survivor can deal the death blow, hopefully get the hideous disguise, and then maybe succeed in the third one. But essentially, it's very difficult to have more than one Ageless Apprentice in a settlement, which is fine because it is very, very powerful. And I think it's one of the best things about the Lion Knight expansion, along with the hybrid fighting arts. So that's Ageless Apprentice. That's how you get it. I really can't tell you how to use it because there's so many combinations that I would never be able to list them all, because Kingdom Death is a big complicated game, and when you're able to rotate gear, suddenly you are just cooking. Okay, so next up we have the Acanthus Doctor. This is gained in the Flower Knight expansion, and what you need to do is you have to craft during sense memory a Vespertine bow. And now let's see, I actually need to flip to that page. There we go, sense memory. Back we go. Okay, so as you can see, Vespertine bow, when you craft it for an Osseous Bloom, Sighing Bloom, Organ and a Hide, very affordable. Generally, you'll get this against most fights where the Flower Knight is involved. It's very generous with its resources. And you'll add the Necrotoxic Mistletoe timeline 4 years from now. Your goal at this point is, before this event triggers, you want to get Sculpture. Sculpture is key to unlocking the Acanthus Doctor, so rush it. It's a paint consequence, so it's not too far up the tree. It's very good. It'll give you a fighting art that you can effectively copy onto survivors endlessly. I love putting Timeless Eye on this, for example. That's a great one, but there's a whole bunch. But you need Sculpture, and we'll see why as we look at the Necrotoxic Mistletoe event. I'm not going to read all of this. Suffice to say, the survivors come back, get 5 survival each, returning survivors. Then you have to nominate a health-conscious survivor, so your choice who. I would generally pick a new survivor, so they can last as long as possible with this fighting art. They gain an understanding and a courage, and they check up on their sleepy friends. So, you roll on the table, 1 to 2, oh boy, death. 4 people die. No cannibalize benefits either. They run away and then blow up in the forest. On a 3, 4 or a 5, you lose 4 population. and the health-conscious survivor gains the flower addiction disorder. That's a disorder that means they have to depart to hunt the flower knight, and that's all they're interested in. But on a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you have this result where the survivors die and you lose 4 population, except on a 7, 8, 9, 10, if you have sculpture, you get this extra piece of text, which is, if the settlement has innovated sculpture, the health-conscious survivor uses tools to dissect and research the plants and their pollen. As buds appear on their body, they manage the invasive plant and gain the Acanthus Doctor's secret fighting art. Sadly, a few die from infection, -2 population. So, first of all, yeah, pretty rough on population, but you can actually get flowers while fighting the Flower Knight that can be turned into population. They have a creepy flower-shaped troll face, but they're just their population, so don't worry, the Flower Knight can help you out in these potential population losses. Another thing you can get from the Flower Knight is you can get Otherworldly Luck, which is a fighting art that gives you +1 to any rolls you make on settlement and hunt phase tables. So you can stack the odds a little bit more in your favour by ensuring that you craft, during sense memory, Otherworldly Luck onto the survivor you're planning to use for the Necrotoxic Mistletoe event, your potential doctor. I just got the Vespertine Bow here. This one, you can, essentially, if you want to make lots of Acanthus Doctors, you can chain doing this year after year after year. So you can go hunt the Flower Knight, make a Vespertine Bow, give a survivor Otherworldly Luck, and then you do it the year after that and the year after that, and you can chain a bunch of Acanthus Doctors. Honestly, you don't need more than 1 or 2, but the Vespertine Bow is still a very solid long-range luck-based bow. It used to be one of the best weapons in the game. It got a well-deserved nerf to pull its strength down to 1, which I'm very happy with. I wouldn't use it on Acanthus Doctor, but you could, so it is an option. So let us actually look at Acanthus Doctor itself. This is a secret fighting art. You can wear up to 3 satchel gear cards. Normally you're limited to 1 of each named piece of gear, except for weapons, which have their own special rules for that, but suddenly here you can have 3 satchel gear cards. Additionally, when you depart, if you're not wearing any armour, so no armour keywords, for each green affinity you have, you gain +1 strength token and add 1 armour to all hit locations. So if you've got 3 green affinities, +3 strength tokens, +3 to all hit locations. Finally, you have the ability on the showdown to spend your activation and a flower or fresh Acanthus resource to heal a permanent injury that either you or an adjacent survivor suffered this showdown. This kind of highlights what the Acanthus Doctor does. It does everything. It is a master of all trades. Not a jack of all trades, an absolute master at them. There was a long time people would call this as being one of the most busted and overpowered things in the game. That's kind of changed with the Ark survivors all raising the bar for how strong survivors can be, but this is still very powerful. And what we have here is a sample gear grid and a selection of cards. So this gear grid we see here, we're using Flower Knight gear, Gorm gear, and Spidicules gear. And the key thing is these affinities. So first of all, we can see here we've got our satchels. This is usually the place you put the satchels. It's really nice if you can manage to connect these sides up, but that can sometimes be tricky. We can see a few examples on the right here that include some extra things you could consider using. The big one is having the first aid kit in the middle. There's very few items that have this cross shape of green affinities. There's a pattern in the Gambler's Chest, if I remember correctly, but otherwise first aid kit is amazing, and it's just a really good piece of gear. We've got round leather shield. We're not restricted from using shields. We've got a scavenger kit, you know, that's like just for the green affinities. Nice to have it. Somebody else could run it. And then over here, Power Potion is very strong because it actually gives you more strength tokens. So it effectively doubles your strength tokens. You'll wound most monsters on a 2+ with that. Green Ring gives you a ton of extra armor anytime you're targeted. So you can get targeted 1 every 4 turns and gain 15 armor points spread across all your hit locations, meaning the monster's going to struggle to kill you. I have the Whistling Mace up here because the Whistling Mace and the Skullcap Hammer both have really good abilities, but they struggle from having really bad strength. What does the Acanthus Doctor bring? Strength. Loads of strength. So this is just one example. I've got a few more sort of things you can run in here. So obviously monster grease, extra evasion, you're always going to have the max unlocked. Sunspot Lantern, this is an unusual pairing of affinities, that's pretty solid. We got, these aren't armour, despite providing armour points and being part of an armour set, so the Sentry, Shoulder Pads and Greaves, and of course they can be calcified for even more armour points. And the Tool Belt, you can run tools instead. This is an old classic where you run a pickaxe and you run the Tool Belt from the Manhunter. Green Charm, I don't massively rate the Green Charm, but it is definitely, it's a whole green affinity with an upside. You're likely to always have this active, so it's definitely something you can consider. As I say, Acanthus Doctors are kind of your jack of all trades, master of everything class. They do it all. They're incredibly strong. They're a delight to play, and also these satchels, you shouldn't overlook the fact that they can depart with resources, including perishable ones. So they can take Acanthus, they can take flowers out with them, and they can use those for ability and effectively being a walking, talking tank hospital, I guess is the best way to describe it. So this is a delight. It's one of the things I still really enjoy from the Flower Knight. It is a lot of fun. Typically, I think you only really need one at a time of Acanthus Doctors. It's nice to have a backup, but you can generally make these about half the time you're trying, as long as you grab the otherworldly luck as well during the process. So that it's a very strong and very good secret fighting art. It's part of what is enticing about the Flower Knight as a monster, as a quarry monster. Next on our list we have Clarity of Darkness, aka the Gloom Man. So getting these is a bit of a journey, and we're going to walk through it one step at a time. But what you've actually got with this, once you have a Gloom Man going, is you have an incredibly evasive, maneuverable survivor who can either occasionally hit really, really hard or effectively be completely untargetable. The monster can't do anything to touch them. So let's talk about how you get it. And the first thing you need is you need to get Blotted Out. This is something that's dropped onto survivors. Ideally you get the 3 survivors here, and then you add Forgotten Fear to the timeline. So I'm going to flip to Forgotten Fear, and then we will go look at the Blotted Out. So Blotted Out is terrible. It's a terrible fighting art. It's thematic as heck, but it's terrible. Whenever you suffer a brain trauma, you gain a bleeding token, and that's it. It's eating one of your fighting art slots, and it's effectively a disorder in your fighting art slot. But it isn't. You don't want to get rid of it, because this is the first step. So when we hit Forgotten Fear, we're going to roll on this table and we nominate a survivor with Blotted Out. If we don't have any, the Slender Man's going to ambush, which is not great. But if we do, we remove Blotted Out and then we roll on this table. And if we get a 3+, we have various different effects. The key things here is we reveal the horror, which is going to be the Nemesis showdown against the Slenderman, as it turns up. But we also get Spiral Ganglia Disorder. And that is our next step. So Spiral Ganglia, which can also just be gained randomly from the Disorder deck, gives you the Darkness Awareness Showdown. At the start of the showdown gives you the Darkness Awareness Survivor Status card. That's this card here. And it reads, whenever a survivor gains a disorder, you gain +1 survival and you place a synapse token on this card. When you have 3 or more synapse tokens, you remove the Spiral Ganglia Disorder from all survivors. Another survivor of your choice gains the Clarity of Darkness Secret Fighting Art, and you archive this card. So we can already see, in order to trigger this, we want to find monsters that cause a lot of disorders to be triggered, and we want somebody else in the group who is ready to receive the Clarity of Darkness Secret Fighting Art. Also, we don't want to take more than 1 Spiral Ganglia survivor out on a hunt at a time, because this is just going to remove it from all of them. So 1 at a time, have your target. Eventually it should happen. It might even happen when fighting the Slender Man in the special showdown that's occurring. We've made it. We've made it to Clarity of Darkness. At the start of the showdown, gain the Path of Gloom Survivor status card, another status card. There is a deadly otherworldly presence about you. Other survivors cannot voluntarily end their movement adjacent to you. Again, I'd call this pretty self-explanatory, but half of it is buried away on this Path of Gloom card. So, let's look at that. Path of Gloom. You are not insane unless you have 5+ insanity. When you're insane, flip this card to Gloom Man. So, we need the threshold. Need to hit 5+ insanity, become insane, and then this card flips. And this is what all this journey's been about. You're now the Gloom Man, and your abilities are you cannot be targeted or have the priority target token. So anything involving targeting cannot get you. Instead, when you move, place yourself anywhere on the showdown board, gain +1 d10 to wound attempts. At the end of your attack, you set your insanity to 0, you're knocked down, and then this card will flip back. Notably, if you do not ever attack, this status is not going to be removed from you. And this is how you make the best support survivor in the game. A survivor that cannot ever be targeted by the monster and is almost never harmed by it. They just take incidental damage. So if the monster's like doing an AoE and you happen to be in it, otherwise they just get to ignore the monster. That means, like Crystal Skin, like Leyline Walker, you can chuck a couple of shields or whatever in, or a useful armor set to protect you, and for the rest of it, you can fill it up with various items and other things that activate without attacking. And it is very powerful to have a survivor who's consistently able to do stuff to the monster that it cannot react to, controlling its AI, removing bleed, controlling its hit locations, interacting with terrain, all of that kind of stuff. The Gloom Man does everything, and they can be anywhere they need to be on the board. You can play a nice Squire build, which is a support type survivor who's gradually coming into focus, that stands around near another survivor and provides them with help. The world is your oyster. Absolutely, go nuts. You've got a ton of things you can do. Now, you may be wondering then, what's the gear grid doing here? So we're going to talk about probably the most busted thing you can do in this game. It is really, really busted to the point that I don't do it because it sort of breaks the game apart and leaves you going, well, what's the point? I'm not really playing the game anymore. And that involves using this red ring. So this build is nicknamed the Red Ring of Death because there is a red ring. It kills monsters really effectively. And Red Ring of Death is something that happened to Xbox 360s like 2 decades ago now. So that's where the name originates from. Okay, so let's talk about the red ring. If you get it active, like we have here in this gear grid, then you get if you gain a bleeding token while monster controller, the monster suffers 1 wound, limit twice per round. So that in itself is kind of a bad ability because you can't guarantee you're going to get bled. But if you are getting bled, then you get to deal incidental damage to the monster that skips the hit location deck. It just goes boom, take a wound. So that will kill monsters and they cannot retaliate. And remember, they can't even target the Gloom Man. The Gloom Man's just blipping around the board, having a pleasant time, bleeding all over the place and killing the monster. We can very easily get rid of the bleeding via bandages, which we have here. But how do we bleed ourselves in a reliable fashion? So, we do have a method. Whoop, a little bit too far. If we come over here to storytelling, we can innovate this. We can spend 2 endeavours and we can trigger the White Speaker event. So let's go take a look at that, shall we? Here we are. So, when you trigger White Speaker, a White Speaker arrives at the settlement and you choose a story you'd like to hear. So we get choice. What we're going to pick is Story of the Young Hero. And if we successfully roll a 6+, we're going to get the Story of the Young Hero ability, which reads, at the start of your act, you may recall the heroic sacrifice from the story and bite your wrist. Gain +2 bleeding tokens and +1 survival. So the actual intended design of Story of the Young Hero is you bleed yourself to gain more survival, and so you're risking the chance of dying of bleeding. You can clear that off. It's good because it doesn't use up your act to do this. So you can get some survival back, and you can even immediately remove the bleeding tokens by bandaging up. It's thematic, it's pretty good, it's pretty strong. But as short as you can imagine now, if we have the red ring, then when we're monster controller on the start of our turn, we activate Story of the Young Hero, we get 2 bleeding tokens, the monster takes 2 uncounterable wounds, automatic wounds, and then we can spend our activation to remove those with bandages. Everything else here is just kind of supplementary support. So Rawhide Headband, this could be actually legitimately a full silk set. I've just gone with Rawhide Headband here because we can also be more fair and activate this to control the monster a little bit. We can have whatever we like over here, maybe some hit location control like the Macadai Circlet. The counterweighted axe is purely here for this affinity because it's the kind of thing you can craft along the way. Up red affinities in the core game. I'm trying to use as few sets as possible here. They're sort of hard to get. And then we've got silk boots. I'm highlighting this because it will let you spend 1 survival to gain 2 insanity, which helps you keep Gloom Man on. But again, you've got all the choices in the world. All you need to do is have the red ring, have it active with the appropriate affinities, and have a way of clearing the bleeding off. The most extreme version of this has all the other survivors run away using the runaway event, which is from pictographs. And that means that the monster doesn't have any way of accidentally hitting you unless they have an instinct that deals some kind of untargetable detrimental effect. So there we are. Literally, you arrive at the showdown board, you start as monster controller, you bleed yourself, the monster does its thing, then it starts survivors acts, all the other survivors try and run away, or flee to the corners, or hide in tall grass, or whatever it takes to get away from the monster, and then on your act you bleed yourself, deal 2 wounds, remove the bleed, and then you wait for the monster controller tile to come back round to you, and you rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. The monster never gets to hit anyone, because you can't be targeted. The monster never gets to draw any of its hit location cards or its trap. It's just done for. And as I said, there's very few monsters that can handle this. It's not an engaging way of playing. You could be more legitimate and fair, and instead of bleeding yourself being the only way you're doing it, you could just have a Gloom Man survivor with a bunch of items providing support. You could have the red ring on them still as kind of an emergency escape valve. That's really up to you. This is a co-op game. You play how you want. I do actually want to see the red ring changed. It's either really, really, really situational and not great, or it does stuff like this, broken nonsense. And that's not a good place for a gear card to be. So that's Gloom Man. This is the Red Ring of Death build. Now you know if anyone talks about it. It's roughly, it can be more or less whatever you like, as long as it's Red Ring, Story of the Young Hero, and bandages in the same build. Everything else is very much optional. So yeah, that's Gloom Man. I love Gloom Man as a support survivor. I don't really use it on an offensive survivor at all because this flipping is a pain in the butt and having to rebuild your insanity back up. 5 is a fair bit to try and get to, but there are, methods. So yeah, there we are. It's your boy. Right, and next up we're going to go to the Necromancer. This is the Lion God secret fighting art, and it essentially changes the physiology of the survivor who has it, and you can only have 1 survivor in the settlement with it. So the process to unlock it is, first of all, you have to defeat a Lion God, and then you'll have this Knowledge Worm event, and this will give you the Knowledge Worm innovation. That's this here, and at the start of each settlement phase it adds 1 scrap to the settlement storage. Departing survivors gain +3 survival and +3 insanity. If any of those survivors have 10 plus insanity, you trigger the Gracious Host story event. So if we just flip to this, here it is. I'm going to read this one, it's a good one. The worm's arrival in the settlement coincided with a dark feeling in the back of your mind, a feeling that has only grown over time. As the days went by, you found yourself alone with the worm more and more often, standing over it in a stupid, hypnotic state. Embarrassed and confused, you kept this behaviour a secret from the settlement until it was too late. You nominate a survivor with the highest insanity, randomising the case of ties, to ingest. Ingesting is rolling a dice on a 1 to 2. Your eyes bulge out as the worm's toxins course through you. Your veins burst, emptying out into a pool of silver. You are dead. Add 2 broken lantern resources as settlement storage. That represents the silver. Silver in Kingdom Death is kind of interchangeably used alongside iron. On a 3, 4, 5 or 6, just as you're about to eat the worm, you hesitate as if snapping out of a trance. Your mind clear, you find yourself suddenly face to face with a horrific parasite. Screaming, you cast it to the ground. As it slithers away, you wonder why you didn't kill it. If you have sacrifice innovated though, a 4, 5 or 6 will take you straight to 7, 8, 9, 10. Death's Embrace. This is the result we want, even if it sounds pretty bad. Let's read it. You feel your jaw dislocate, and the blood vessels in your throat and chest cavity burst as the gigantic worm somehow forces its way into your body. Your veins burn as if being replaced by the currents of white hot silver. Through the agony, you suddenly understand the source of the Lion God's immortality and madness. The settlement loses the knowledge worm innovation, you archive it, and you gain the Necromancer secret fighting art. So, that's this. When you depart, you gain 1 armor point or hit locations for each gear card in your grid with the symbol keyword. If you would roll on a severe trauma table, so that's a non-specified severe injury, roll on the worm trauma table on the other side of this card instead. So this just has it deals less permanent injuries to you, but also has a lot of bleeding. It is better than normal severe injuries, except it's a higher chance of dying, so you do need to pay attention to that. Severe injuries, random severe injuries, are a bit scary, a bit less so if it's a head one though compared to normal. Now, given what we've got here, we have a loaded secret fighting art that's saying to you, use symbols. So what are symbols? They're these. They're Mehendi. There is one Mehendi in the game that doesn't have the symbol keyword. That is the boss Mehendi with the Screaming Antelope. I think that's an oversight. We'll have to see if it gets fixed or not. But it's not super important because, as you can see from this grid, let's just click in on this. As you can see from this grid, these symbols, these all combine together. Each one of these is gained through Splunking of Death? I think it's Splunking of Death. There's 2 Splunkings of Death, I think. It's the event that occurs during the Lion God showdown, where the Lion God picks up a piece of terrain and hefts it or hurls it at someone and reveals the entrance to the necropolis below, the Silver City. And you go in and explore it, and you'll find these various resources that you can open with a death reading. We'll take a little look at the page in a moment. And if you're successful, and the Necromancer is always successful, you will get a little bit of insight into the world and one of these various different symbols. You can see they're kind of designed to connect together. So if we get all of them, we have access to all of these things. They're giving us a bunch of extra affinities and armor points, and then everything else is just kind of supporting that. So I chose here the round leather shield simply for this connection here, because that's a green. You really don't need this. If you want to be able to encourage and not be deaf, you could leave this off. This one, on the other hand, I think is a little bit more important. It's a down red, which is kind of awkward to try and get your hands on, but it activates the Butcher's Blood, which is for every 10 insanity you have, you gain +1 speed and strength. This is really powerful. This used to be used to one-shot monsters completely in combination with the counterweighted axe. That got changed, thankfully. But this is still pretty strong. We have the God Mask here simply because if you are able to craft it, this is one of the best gear grids to use it, because you've got all of these amazing amount of infinities, and you can spend survival to gain insanity, and insanity to gain survival, so that combo's there. And then we have the Gloom Katana, simply because this weapon has strength equal to insanity. This could be any useful, viable weapon, just like this and this. These three are kind of, well, all of these four are flex slots. We don't need any of these in particular. We could always run other things. But yeah, this is a very interesting and unique build, and it's kind of self-propagating. Once the worm's done its thing and jumped down your throat, these are when I talk about with the death reading. So Necromancers may choose their results without rolling whenever they roll D10, so they always succeed. Lantern Mehendi's there, Glyph of Solitude's there, Butcher's Blood is there, Death Mehendi is there, and Bone Witch Mehendi is there. If we go back to Splunking of Death, we are going to see the tricky part. So these resources here, Blue Box, Triptych, Canopic Jar, Silver Urn and Sarcophagus, they are what give you these resources during death reading, give you the gear. Some of these, like the Sarcophagus, you have to be fighting a level 3+ Lion God to just get to it. That's a lot of work. That is a challenging monster to fight. So if you want to play with a Necromancer, you're going to need to get good at handling it. I will do a video sometime far off in the future going through the Lion God Showdown. It's a very challenging one. The Lion God doesn't play fair a lot of the time, but this is where you can do it. I think the level 1 Lion God is very reasonable, but of course we don't get a lot of symbols for a Necromancer if we are just fighting the level 1 Lion God. So you're going to have to get strong, get powerful, and get good, and handle it. It's always a challenging monster. Yeah, that's the Necromancer. I think this is the second hardest of all to unlock. It's easier because you'll need to kill a level 1 Lion God. You don't have to do any special specific things. But we do have one final specialist class to look at, and I think this is the hardest one to unlock. This is a real bear to deal with, and that is the Silk Surgeon from the Spidicules. Now you'll have to excuse me one moment because I had to use gear cards for the Acanthus Doctor, so I'm going to get them right now. So here we are. Right, what is the Silk Surgeon? So this is a unique and special survivor that you get while fighting Spidicules. In order to get this unlocked, we have to trigger this Puppets Embalming event. In order to get that going, we have to take a number of steps. The very first one is we've got to be fighting a level 3 Spidicules. Why? We need legendary cards. None of the other levels have legendary cards, only the level 3 does. And now the reason for that is because Puppets Embalming is only triggered by this card Stalk Puppet. So what you need to do, hunt a level 3 Spidicules. You have to have Animate here happen. You have to get hit and damaged by it, and it's a heck of a damage. And then you gain the Stalk Puppet Survivor Status card, which is one of these cards where you put your miniature right on here and you are out of the showdown, and you are out of it for the rest of the showdown. So everyone else is a survivor down and has to finish the fight without you there. If they lose, you're done and everyone's dead. If they succeed, then we get to roll for Puppets Embalming. That's over here, and let's have a little read through it, shall we? Puppets Embalming. By the time your body is freed from the stalk, all of your blood has been replaced. Immediately after the killing blow is struck, you are cut free from the monster's forehead stalk, your eyes rolling and mouth foaming as your fellow survivors frantically attempt to rouse you. If your settlement innovated bloodletting, spoilers, always innovate bloodletting. Your fellow survivors treat your head wound with giant leeches. You may proceed to the 9 to 10 result without rolling. That's the result we want. So, just to put it very simply, I'm not going to read through all the cut-free results because you should not be doing this. You shouldn't be hunting a level 3 Spidicules without bloodletting already innovated. Bloodletting is kind of a meat and potatoes essential innovation. You need it at some point or another, otherwise Plague will wreck you, and it does a whole load of very useful things. So we're going to assume you have it, and you proceed directly to 9 to 10. Your mind is filled with a rush of strange memories. You think you can see faint threads connecting your surroundings. Closing your eyes brings them into focus. Gain +1 permanent accuracy and the Silk Surgeon's secret fighting art. So these threads could be threads laying around all of this territory by Spidicules, or they could be the very threads mentioned in the Leyline Walker. We don't know, but what we get is this beauty of a secret fighting art. And this is a predecessor to Knowledges, because it's a secret fighting art that you level up. We'll talk about leveling it up in a moment, but for now, let's look at the levels. Rank 0 does nothing. Rank 1, you can spend an activation while adjacent to another survivor to add 2 armor points to one of their hit locations. Notably, this isn't healing, so this can go above their starting amounts, which means you can start doing it from the very beginning of the showdown if you want to. At level 2, while all armour in your gear grid is silk and all jewellery is amber, you gain +2 evasion. That's nice, that's quite tanky. During the aftermath, roll 1d10 for each other survivor that died during the showdown. On 7+ revive them. That was the level 3 element there. Which I forgot to put at the start, put it at the end. Woo. That's quite nice. You don't really want to be having survivors dying, but it's good to have. So level 1 and level 2 are the big, interesting, really strong things, but we have another hidden, quote-unquote, hidden secret for the Silk Surgeon, which if you perform Silk Surgery, which is done via the... I should remember the name of this innovation. It's the silk refining innovation that you gain for defeating the Spidicules. It has it printed on there. Silk Surgery has this thing. Right, so you normally have to roll, but the Silk Surgeon doesn't. The Silk Surgeon always gets the best result, which is a 10. And the Silk Surgeon collects a finger in payment from the survivor. So as you can see, they're hanging around her neck here. And then they increase their Silk Surgeon level by 1. And the radical procedure, you gain a random disorder on the nominated survivor, you roll a hit location dice, and these things happen. But if you're a Silk Surgeon, again, you get to choose. This is one of the few ways you can remove a bunch of severe injuries. So the Silk Surgeon is really incredible. You may even want to just keep them in the settlement if you're not going to take them out, so they can just do this stuff. Because they can heal, like, look at that. +1 permanent accuracy, remove all head injuries other than blind at the cost of losing all understanding. Fine, if you completed your understanding track, you don't need to go through it again. You won't get any more unlocks, but you know, that's a reasonable price to pay to remove permanent head injuries. Or you can get a heart implant, permanent +4 strength, -4 luck, and your hunt XP goes to 14. Not amazing, but retired survivors is not necessarily a deal breaker. Dismembered arm, you get to swap it to another survivor, effectively swapping arms and get +1 permanent speed. This is really good for two-handed survivors, and obviously a survivor who's lost both of their hands. Permanent waist injuries, remove them all, suffer -1 population. Sure, very useful if you have a survivor with, say, destroyed genitals, or there's also some that really badly impact your ability to be a good fighter, and you just get rid of a survivor who isn't of much use. And then finally, new legs. Exchange all permanent legs injuries with the survivor of your choice. They lose their legs, you get them. Very nice, very strong. Now what we have here is just a quick little gear grid to highlight one of the things you can do if you are taking your Silk Surgeon on hunts and showdowns. This is, again, a green ring build, because you're wearing silk armour anyway. And you're allowed to wear only amber jewellery. Green, these are the rings, our jewellery. The green ring is the best one of the lot to fit with silk armour. The blue ring is a real mess to try and get connected. It's a good ring, but you can see the affinities that are on the silk suit don't like cover everything. You put the turban here, you put the silk robes here. You lose the turban ability, which is a shame because it's very strong and unique. And then you'd need another up-facing blue here, so you know that it would sit here, and you would connect it all up appropriately. Green ring, fantastic. This can be whatever you need it to be that just connects these two. It's nice to have all of these connected, but really the essential one of these two is the silk boots, because it's incredibly rare and unusual. Silk sash, if you don't get it done, that's fine. So you could put monster grease here. We've got room for a proper weapon. The silk whip is here for affinities. Unless you have a massive amount of strength, this isn't really good enough for the time of the game where you would unlock Silk Surgeon. But it is just a nice little extra benefit to have, because whips on hunts are really, really useful. And this is a hard to get affinity pairing. So this is mostly here for affinities. We could give up on the Silk Turban and then just run, a green that connects up here or whatever. That's fine, I guess. But I think this is worth it to get access to this Silk Turban ability. Turning monster to face away from you is incredibly useful and a unique form of control. So yeah, that's it. That's Silk Surgeon. So here we go. We are here at the end. We've looked at all of these. My personal favourite is the Silk Surgeon. I think, but I also do like the Gloom Man, and I think the Necromancer is super unique and sweet, but it is a long journey to get there, and at the end of it all, the payoff is fine. Fun and unique, but doesn't blow me away. And even though I've jammed a load of symbols onto the Necromancer's gear grid there, the Necromancer just is kind of gear agnostic, really. You don't have to put symbols on. So that's our specialist classes. Right. So going ahead, there's one more video I want to do in the roll call series covering off tanks, but I am waiting until either the Gambler's Chest or the Indomitable Survivor Willow promo box arrives on the simulator, because I want to cover the sword versions of off tanks, and that isn't something that is heavily effective in the core game, in the base original expansions, first generation stuff. It really comes to life with promotional content and with the Gambler's Chest, so that'll be there in the future. Next video is going to be Dark Bestiary on the Gorm, as I'm doing them all in timeline order. That might be 2-3 weeks away, maybe longer. I don't know yet. These take a lot of work. The Dark Bestiaries are a lot of heavy lifting and admin and analysis and playing showdowns and checking notes and everything, so it's a lot of the work. It'll come out when it comes out. It's just, that's the way it is. I don't like slowing down doing the content on this, but that happens. After that, I'm going to, unless Willow arrives so I can crack that out quickly, and I don't see an update before Black Friday happening anyway, so probably won't occur. We'll see. But if Willow comes on, I will do the roll call video so I can put a bookend on this series and be like, that's done. Put it to one side until new exciting rolls turn out. And instead, I will do a primer video on each of the 3 campaigns in the first generation. So I'm going to do a primer on People of the Lantern, a primer on People of the Sun, and a primer on People of the Stars. And I will break down the timeline. I will go through all of the little bits and pieces, the uniqueness of each thing. We'll talk a little bit about the story near the back end of each of the videos, because the lore on those campaigns is all interesting, but I want to put it at the far end so people who don't want the story spoiled, enjoy speculating, or have have a different opinion to me on how the story unfolds, which is perfectly valid. Unreliable narrators and lots of gaps in knowledge leaves a massive space for hypothesizing on various things. So yeah, I'll cover those. And then I imagine by the time I've gotten through most of all of that, we're going to see the Gambler's Chest on there. Finally, there is another Kingdom Death related, simulator related piece of content announcement due to come out. That's going to be announced when it happens, probably in November, probably before Black Friday, on my Patreon. So it'll be a public announcement there, little post updates. This is happening, these things. I'm not going to talk about it now. It's just all going on. So that's it. Pens down, and I'll see you next time.